Welcome to Cheat Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. I spent 11 years building landmark structures across New England, designing things meant to outlast everyone in the room when they were approved. I applied the same principles to my marriage and believed it was equally solid. The day I walked into that café and saw my wife's hand intertwined with another man's, I understood in a single moment that I had been the only one building anything at all. My name is Adrian Steele. I'm 43. Senior architect at Thornton & Associates, one of Boston's premier firms. For 11 years I was married to Jennifer, a photographer whose studio I had watched grow from a small rented space in the Arts District into something genuinely respected in artistic circles. We had chosen careers over children. I was designing landmark buildings across New England while she built a reputation and a client list. From the outside, we looked like two people who had figured out how to make ambition and partnership coexist. That Tuesday in April started as one of my best professional days in months. After a 3-hour meeting where I refused to compromise on the vision for the Richardson Museum expansion, the board approved my design unanimously. The CEO shook my hand and said, "This is why we hired you, Steele. You don't back down when you know you're right." Feeling that, I decided to surprise Jennifer. I had been buried in the project for weeks and wanted to reconnect. I stopped for lilies from Giovanni's, her favorite since our honeymoon in Italy, and headed to her studio in the Arts District. She left early, her assistant Megan told me, with a hesitation in her voice I noticed but didn't yet understand. Meeting a client at Café Luciana. Some gallery owner. She's been meeting him a lot lately. I thanked her and walked the 6 blocks. The moment I pushed through the door, the world shifted. Jennifer was in a corner booth with a well-dressed man about my age. Her hand wasn't resting near his. Her fingers were intertwined with his. She leaned forward as he spoke, laughing with a warmth and intimacy I recognized immediately because it used to belong to me. I stood over them before either noticed. Jennifer's head snapped up and her smile vanished. I took out my leather-bound notebook, the one where I sketch my greatest designs, and wrote 6 words with the same precision I bring to blueprints. "Don't come home. We're done." I placed the note on the table with the lilies, turned, and walked out. Shoulders level. Stride unbroken. I heard her calling my name behind me. I kept walking. I spent that evening driving through the city I had spent 15 years helping reshape. The Harbor Front Plaza. The Wilson Tower. The Arts Wing at Northeastern. Buildings I had poured myself into while my marriage apparently collapsed around me. Eventually, I headed to my office and buried myself in work until past midnight. When I returned home, Jennifer's car was in the driveway. She had not respected the note. She was sitting in the living room with a glass of wine, composed as if waiting for a dinner guest rather than facing the end of her marriage. She called what I witnessed a business conversation. Said Robert was a colleague. Said I was overreacting. I told her I had spent plenty of time in business conversations. None of them involved intertwined hands and whispers. She said I had been absent for months. That Robert appreciated her work. That he listened. I asked when exactly she had planned to mention there was a problem, before or after the affair. She admitted to 3 months. Said it had been emotional, not physical. Said she wasn't sure she wanted the marriage anymore. Then she added the line that told me everything. She wasn't sure she ever had. I told her to pack her things. That I wanted her gone by morning. She left just after 3 in the morning. A quiet click of the door. No drama. Just gone. The next morning, while reviewing foundation specifications at my desk, my phone rang from an unknown number. The man on the other end introduced himself as Steve. He worked at Jennifer's studio. He told me to check my email. I opened it to find photographs. Jennifer and a man entering a hotel, embracing in a parking lot, laughing over dinner at restaurants I had never been taken to, timestamps spanning months. Then the video, shot from a distance. Jennifer and the man outside his gallery after hours. And her voice, clear and casual. "Adrian will never find out. He's too busy with his precious buildings to notice what's happening right under his nose." The man laughed. The oblivious husband. Classic. I closed the laptop. The betrayal was not a moment of weakness or a lapse in judgment. It was sustained. Calculated. mocked. She had not just been having an affair, she had been performing my humiliation for an audience. I called Steve back. He told me the whole studio knew, that she had never been particularly discreet. He told me because he had been in my position 3 years earlier and nobody had told him until it was too late. I thanked him, and I sat in silence for a long time, not falling apart, but thinking. The architect's response to structural failure is not grief. It is assessment. And I was assessing. Steve told me one more thing when we met in person the following day. The man, Robert, was married. His wife was Anita Collins, a curator at the Gardner Museum. Jennifer had apparently found this amusing, had joked about how clever they were being, how they had systems in place to keep both spouses oblivious. I asked Steve if Anita knew. He didn't think so. Jennifer had called her clueless, focused on her museum career while her husband appreciated other works of art. That evening I drafted an email to the museum. Brief and direct. I have information about your husband that you should know. Would you be willing to meet? I attached one photograph, nothing explicit, just Robert and Jennifer entering a hotel together. My phone number at the bottom. The response arrived the next morning. Her voice on the phone was steady and careful. Is this Adrian Steele? This is Anita Collins. We met at a quiet café far from both the museum and Robert's gallery. She arrived on time, composed, with the attentive eyes of someone trained to assess authenticity in everything she examines. She told me she had suspected for months that Robert had become careless about details, late nights, travel that felt wrong, a phone suddenly password protected. I laid out everything Steve had provided. She examined each piece methodically, her expression never wavering, though her knuckles whitened against her coffee cup. When she finished, she looked up. They think they're very clever, she said. I propose we show them exactly how wrong they are. As she outlined what she had in mind, I recognized something I hadn't expected, a kindred spirit. Someone else who built things to last, who valued integrity, who refused to be made into someone's joke. By the time we finished our coffee, we had an understanding. The plan was straightforward. Anita invited Robert to lunch at Bellini's, a restaurant they frequented for anniversaries and celebrations. Steve arranged for Jennifer to hear, through Megan, that I had been seen there with an attractive woman. Jennifer's curiosity was reliable. She arrived exactly as expected. I saw her enter just as Anita and I were deep in conversation, heads close, her hand occasionally on mine for emphasis, a perfect mirror of what I had walked into at Café Luciana. Jennifer marched directly to our table, righteous indignation on her face. Really, Adrian? This is your response? Dating someone already? I looked up calmly. Jennifer. What a surprise. Anita turned with the composure of someone accustomed to difficult conversations in public spaces. You must be Jennifer. Adrian has told me about you. Jennifer faltered. And you are? Anita Collins. She extended her hand. Curator at the Gardner Museum. And Robert's wife. The color left Jennifer's face entirely. Robert is joining us shortly, Anita added pleasantly. He thinks I'm meeting a potential donor. Surprise. Jennifer's phone was already out, fingers moving, warning him, but he appeared at the entrance before she could reach him. I watched recognition move across his face in sequence. Confusion at seeing his wife with me. Then absolute panic at the sight of Jennifer at the same table. What is happening here? He said, arriving at the table and trying to maintain composure. Clarity. Anita answered. Long overdue. We know everything, I said. The hotels, the trips, the texts, the jokes at our expense. Everything. He suggested taking it somewhere private. I asked why. They had not exactly kept the affair private. Half of Jennifer's studio already knew. Why should the consequences be hidden when the behavior hadn't been? They exchanged a look of genuine panic, two people finally understanding the full scope of their miscalculation. They had assumed we were distracted, oblivious, manageable. They were discovering in real time just how wrong that assumption was. They fled the restaurant separately. That evening, Jennifer's texts arrived in a wave. How dare you? This was an ambush. You had no right to involve his wife. I left them unanswered. She showed up at my office the next day uninvited, passed my assistant's protest, and closed the door behind her. "You've gone too far, Adrian." I remained at my desk, working on the Richardson plans. "Have I? Or have I simply responded appropriately to your choices?" She wanted to know what I wanted from her. "Nothing," I said. The simplicity of it clearly unsettled her more than any demand would have. She shifted approaches. Robert had ended things that morning, said he needed to focus on saving his marriage. She was back to renegotiating with me. I almost admired the audacity. I told her there was no us to renegotiate, that she had made her choices deliberately and repeatedly, and that my lawyer would be in contact. I suggested she find a new gallery to show her work. What I had prepared for her arrival at our house the previous evening was still in my mind as a reference point, and I want to tell you about that too, because it was the moment she fully understood the situation. I had printed every photograph, screenshot, and transcript Steve had provided and arranged them on our dining room table with the same methodical attention I bring to evidence in a board presentation. Chronological order. Dates and locations annotated. Robert's social media photos alongside, including several of him with Anita at gallery openings and charity events. When Jennifer arrived to collect more of her things and followed me downstairs, she froze at the entrance to the dining room. Her photographers, I read the narrative instantly. "What is this?" she asked, her composure gone. "Documentation," I said. "I'm an architect. I believe in thorough planning and solid evidence." She called it an invasion of privacy. I pointed out that our marriage was also a private matter until she made it entertainment for her lover and his colleagues. She asked what I was planning to do with it. I told her I hadn't decided, but that Anita might find it interesting. That was the moment her facade broke completely. She finished packing and left her key on the counter without being asked. The aftermath moved through both their lives with the systematic efficiency of a well-executed demolition. Robert's gallery investors called an emergency meeting, concerned about the reputational damage of a principal whose affair with a represented artist had become known in their professional circles. His position at the gallery became untenable. The board eventually asked for his resignation on the grounds that sleeping with photographers whose work you represent violated professional ethics. Jennifer lost her studio lease. The landlord's wife was friends with Megan, Jennifer's assistant, who had been carrying the weight of knowing for months. When Megan finally spoke, the story moved quickly. The exhibition Jennifer had been preparing, a significant career opportunity, was postponed indefinitely. A client of my firm who collected her photography quietly transferred their project, citing personal conflicts of interest. Anita proceeded with divorce proceedings, systematically and without drama. She was a curator, trained to assess the actual value of things carefully before acting. Her financial interests were protected before Robert had time to organize anything in his favor. His frantic attempts to salvage the marriage and the gallery simultaneously left him managing two fires with insufficient resources for either. Jennifer continued reaching out. Messages that grew more desperate as the professional consequences accumulated. She talked about everything they had built being destroyed. She asked if we could at least talk civilly. I maintained my position with the same steadiness that had earned me respect across 15 years of professional setbacks. No response was the appropriate response. I had nothing left to communicate to someone who had made me a joke in my own marriage. 6 months after the afternoon at Café Luciana, I stood in my redesigned living room and surveyed what had replaced what Jennifer had curated. Architectural photographs from Steve's portfolio on the walls. His eye for built environments was genuinely exceptional. A few select pieces Anita had recommended from emerging artists. The house felt like mine again in a way it hadn't for years. The Richardson Museum project had produced some of my best work. The client noticed, commented that there was something different about the designs. Bolder, more authentic. He was right. Stripping away the pretense that comes with a compromised life had clarified something in how I approached the work. I was designing spaces that were honest in their purpose. Structures with nothing hidden in the foundation. Anita and I had developed a genuine friendship across those months. Dinner occasionally, gallery showings, the kind of relationship that exists between two people who have seen each other in difficult circumstances and found mutual respect on the other side of it. Nothing more than that. We were both too clear-eyed about where we were in our lives to pretend otherwise. She texted one evening, Exhibition opening tonight. Still need a +1. Interested? I replied. Pick you up at 7. At the opening, she pointed out a small notice near the entrance. New Management and Artistic Direction by Megan Lawrence. Steve's girlfriend, I said. Jennifer's former assistant. Robert's former investors were apparently impressed with her vision, Anita said. Life has a way of recalibrating. Then she mentioned she had received Jennifer's wedding invitation. Not to Robert, some photographer she had met at a convention in Miami. The invitation seemed pointed. I told her I had received one too. Went straight to the recycling bin. She raised an eyebrow. You're not curious? Not at all, I said. That chapter is closed. Over dinner after the exhibition, Anita raised her glass. To unexpected allies and difficult times. I touched my glass to hers. And to building something better from the foundation up. She studied me for a moment. You really have moved on. I'm an architect, I said. When a structure fails, you don't keep returning to the collapse. You learn from it. Then you design something stronger. She smiled, the quiet smile of someone who understood exactly what that meant. Driving home that night, I thought about the journey of the previous 6 months. What had started as the most disorienting experience of my adult life had become something else entirely. A structural failure that, once assessed honestly, revealed both the flaws that had existed in the original design and the genuine strengths that had been there all along, waiting to be used properly. The betrayal had been real. The anger had been justified. Jennifer had not stumbled into an affair. She had constructed one deliberately, maintained it carefully, and mocked me in the process. She had made me a recurring joke in a story she was telling someone else. That is not a lapse. That is a choice, sustained across months, refined and protected by cover stories and calculated indifference. But here is what I learned about betrayal that I did not know when I walked into that café. Betrayal is a structural failure. It tells you something failed, but it also tells you where the actual weaknesses were. Things you might have seen earlier if you had been looking more carefully. The distance that had accumulated between Jennifer and me was not only her doing. I had been present at work for years before I was present at home. That is something worth carrying honestly rather than erasing. The response to structural failure is not to rebuild the same structure. It is to use what you learned from the collapse to design something with better integrity. Cleaner lines. Stronger foundations. No hidden compromises in the load-bearing elements. That was what I had built across those 6 months. Professionally, some of my most honest work. Personally, a life stripped of performance and maintained on genuine terms. Friendships that existed because of mutual respect rather than social proximity. A home that felt like mine. I was not the same man who had walked into Café Luciana with a bunch of lilies expecting a pleasant surprise. That man had been building on assumptions he had never tested. He had trusted without verifying, which in architecture is a practice that eventually costs you everything. What I was now was someone who had tested his own foundations under pressure and found them solid. Jennifer had called me the oblivious husband. Said I was too distracted by my buildings to notice what was happening under my nose. She was wrong about the oblivious part. She was wrong about what I would do when I found out. She was wrong about what kind of man she had spent 11 years married to. The only thing she was right about was the buildings. I do build things to last. And this time, starting from honest ground, with clear eyes and no illusions about what the structure actually requires, I intend to build something that does. Thank you for watching.